salary and how it's calculated. And, we just had the conversation and say, look, if you're going to pay market rate, whatever it is, if that's market rate, then that's great. If not, they'll pay more, right, to get people.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a hill they want to die on publicly.
Those guys are very, very serious about getting done as quickly as possible. And I know the net benefit at the end of the day is positive. So, yeah, anything you need on that, just let me know. And Mike's been kind of spearheading it on our side. Just,
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with Mike, but I'd already been well briefed by Robert Allen,
Oh, yeah.
EVP,
Oh,
and
yeah.
said, like I said, can I tell you about this? Like, yes, 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 yes.
Do you, for our meeting, do you want anybody else to attend? Mike's out the 11th.
I think we'll discuss topics that I'd like to at least talk about. Y'all may have some that y'all want to talk about, and then just whoever best facilitates that. For me, I like to keep meetings as concise as possible. So whoever needs to be there, or if there's somebody that just wants to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get something on the schedule and see if I can get it done before the 11th, before Mike leaves, and see if he can participate, if there's anything.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
I'll reach out. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Let me know if you need anything.
We're getting our
Now we.
stoplight up there. Should be getting sprung sometime in the next week or two.
The
Color
156.
Yeah. 156.
I was thinking they're underway on that North Champions, or the Beach Street North Champions signal, so that's good.
Yeah.
I drove through there the other day just to see what it looked like.
Yeah, it won't be finished before school starts again, but it will be close. And I don't know if you saw for the bond package, we've included the signalization of the last remaining stop sign intersection at Beach Street and one of the three beach streets in Alta Vista.
Okay, yeah. I did see that. It was funny. I was like, am I the only one that doesn't know exactly which one this is without somebody pointing it?
It
Should
is
be on a map.
literally the only intersection on Beach Street going all the way south, all the way north that has a four-way stop sign.
Okay, that would. Yeah.
Good. So we'll get that one fixed because and then there won't be anything left to do on Beach until we start going further north again.
Which could happen anytime, right? Beach goes on forever.
I'm a little concerned about the little donut in Westport Parkway and those warehouses are and how we're going to get that resolved, especially in light of some stupidity that council has done with regard to calling out the majority of the commissioners' court.
That guy is under construction on a new warehouse right now. That
Great.
Which I would say, fortunately, at least it's not in any future right of way. But it's
You may have one building survive.
I'll get a meeting set up, and then we'll get, y'all get agenda items sent over for our meeting in the next week or so, and go from there.
Hey, Charlie.
I was gonna ask Chuck.
Charlie.
For that for y'all. Just let her know. I just wanted to hear the bond update. And when I saw the budget thing was going on, I said, they'll listen to that too. Learn something new.
Not a good look. Had some discussion about that. He did this well after the previous session. We are concerned about
I'll follow up with them this afternoon and just make sure, let them know I talked to y'all and reinforce that conversation with them.
that result is bad. Right now, it's still a lot of money coming to the Alliance, Texas area, or almost nothing at all to the Darrow Ranch area. I think that's going to be problematic. Bond package actually passing as a whole.
We're having pretty serious conversations as well between
Okay, council, I think we're going to get started if y'all are ready.
county involvement in things.
Okay, I'll call us to order. And this is our bond workshop. Over to Jay Chapa.
This is a follow-up for our last meeting, and Christiane's going to kick it off. And we have an update on our, with more information on how we move forward with and pick streets. That was a question last week on how the prioritization happens. And recommendations. You should have a list that matches the list that you'll be seeing from TPW as they come up. So, Christiane?
Yes, that's all I was going to say, Christine Simmons. So, yep, good increased collaboration over the last few weeks to respond. I'm almost immediately going to turn it over to Lauren, but like Jay said, you do have a list that is slightly updated just to match the recommendations that you're going to see from TPW today, which involves some shifting from arterials into neighborhood streets. So you can follow along there or check out the latest list. We can also provide that electronically if you don't already have it in Dropbox, but we'll let TPW take the reins.
All right, Mayor and Council, thank you for your leadership and dedication to Fort Worth's infrastructure. We understand that the roadway improvements are a priority for every council district, and this proposed program is designed to ensure that investments are made where they will have the greatest long-term benefit. So today we'll examine how the 2026 bond program strategically directs resources toward the streets most in need of reconstruction. So with over 1,800 lane miles beyond maintenance, this will require an estimated $4 billion today. So the decisions that we make now will shape the sustainability and functionality of our roadways for years to come. So I'd like to turn over to Patricia Wadsack, our Assistant Director for Capital Delivery.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about strategic investments in our minor roadways this morning. So our agenda this morning. is first we're going to talk a little bit about the status of our streets. Then we're going to talk about how we manage our network to include heavy maintenance and reconstruction. We're going to get into how we prioritize the streets in the neighborhood street program. We're going to give you some information on the minor roadway program, and then we'll roll into the 2026 bond recommendations. So first we'll talk about the status of our streets. I think you've probably seen this map before, but in the gray, these are our streets that need preservation. That's about 40% of our network. And about 30% of our network is represented in the orange streets. Those streets need maintenance, and that is normally paid with PAYGO. So we'll go into that in a little more depth. The red streets are the streets in the worst condition, and they represent about 23% of our network, and they need full reconstruction, which is normally paid through a bond program. So about once every 4 years, we go out and we hire a company and we have them drive the entire network and take data, and we determine something called a pavement condition index, or PCI. And that data, that number, is how we rank those streets. You can see gray is above 85, orange is between 85 and 50, and red is below, with a PCI below 50. And as Lauren just mentioned, if we were to replace today all of the streets we have in our network below a PCI of 50, it would cost over $4 billion. So I wanted to give you a visual so you could understand, instead of in numbers, in pictures, what these kinds of streets look like. So on the top left, we have the pictures of streets in excellent or good condition. Those streets require preventative maintenance and surface treatments, and that's normally done with our in-house crews. Move over to the fair streets. Those streets require heavy maintenance, and we normally pay for that with PAYGO. On the far right, you have an example of a poor street, and it requires complete reconstruction, which is paid for through our bond program. So now I have just a little bit of data by council district to show you. We have about 50% concrete streets and 50% asphalt streets in our network, and this is how they split out by council district. The concrete is shown in the orange and the asphalt in the blue. This is how the pavement condition index, or PCI, splits out by council district. As you can see across the board, our PCI for our concrete is significantly higher than our PCI for our asphalt streets. And this is broken out by council district, the streets that have a PCI below 50. So these are the streets that are in a failed condition, and bond funding is required to reconstruct those streets. We've given you at the top of each bar the number of lane miles per council district, and also the percent of failed lane miles as compared to the total lane miles in that council district. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we manage our network. And
Mayor, may I ask one question? Just to
Yes.
clarify something. Okay,
Certainly.
I understand how the PCI works. It's looking at the current pavement condition.
Correct.
What about paper streets? Are they lumped in there in terms of, below 50? Or paper streets a different category?
No, paper streets are not included in this because they don't technically exist yet.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how we manage our network, specifically the heavy maintenance and reconstruction pieces. So heavy maintenance projects, these are the ones that are PAYGO funded, focus on preserving the existing pavement through asphalt overlay, what we call POL, and concrete panel replacement. So asphalt overlay only goes down a couple inches. We take off a couple inches and replace it. POL goes down 8 to 10 inches and we replace it, or we go in and replace concrete panels. There is minimal curb and gutter, sidewalk, or driveway repair done as a part of these projects. We never change the pavement material. If it's already asphalt, it stays asphalt. There's no design involved. And because of all that, we have faster construction timelines and lower costs. This is used to extend the life of the street, not completely reconstruct it, and restart the life of the street. These projects cannot be capitalized, and so therefore they're funded through PAYGO. So when we're talking about heavy maintenance, that's a little more detail on what that means. Things we consider when we're talking about heavy maintenance: we look at the total life cycle costs, we look at the soil conditions beneath the street, we look at the type of water line, cast iron lines versus PVC. So cast iron lines are very brittle, and the heavy equipment that is needed to do heavy maintenance tends to break them. So typically, if we know we've got a street that's got cast iron in it, we will pull it out and not use it as a candidate for heavy maintenance. We also look at the risk of failure, and we look at our maintenance cycles. What we're trying to do is strategically invest our money to catch those streets right before they fall into a lower category of maintenance and improve them. So we're trying to look at the maintenance cycles and strategically decide which streets need the maintenance the most. This is a picture of the heavy maintenance projects we've done in Fort Worth in the last 4 years, just to give you a visual of where they've been. And this is a list. So this list is, or this chart is broken out by council district, and it again shows you where we've invested money in the last 4 years in heavy maintenance, and it's got the lane miles on each piece. And then at the top, we've got the percent of total lane miles per council district. Across the board, we're averaging about 3% per district. So now we're going to move in and talk about our reconstruction projects. These are the projects that are actually bond funded. So here we're going to do full street reconstruction from subgrade to surface. We're going to replace 100% of the curb, gutter, sidewalks, and driveway approaches. The pavement type might be asphalt or concrete. What we do when we bid these projects is we bid them out both ways. And we see how the price comes in from the contractor, and then we make a decision based on how the price comes in as to whether we're going to move forward with a concrete or an asphalt replacement. This includes full design plans, which are required to add the ADA upgrades and the curbs. The street width will always remain the same. We do not acquire additional right-of-way with this type of project. And in this project, we can include water and sewer line replacement as well as stormwater improvements. It's higher cost, longer construction time frame, but it provides long-term infrastructure upgrade. So here is a visual of the minor roadway projects that have been in the 2018 and 2022 bond programs, as well as those that are proposed in the 2026 bond programs. You will notice that the majority of this work is inside the loop. And here's the same bar chart as we showed for maintenance, showing how this breaks out by council district. Again, you can see how many lane miles were built in each bond program or proposed per council district, and then how that stacks up as a percent of total lane miles in that council district. So now we're going to move on to prioritization. And you do have this as a handout, but I wanted to, this prioritization is a very complex, multi-step process, and I just wanted to give you a visual of how complex it is. We can geek out later about, about the details of this if you want, but I just wanted to give you an idea. So the projects are selected based on their PCI, and we're going to look at the curb and gutter and the PCI of each street in the city to determine where they fall in this decision tree. So I just zoomed in here on one piece, the asphalt piece, to let you see that only 2 of these options end up in capital reconstruction on this piece of the decision tree. So we have lots of other things that we can do, like the MOL and POL and the sealants. But then, so we use this process and we identify which streets need capital reconstruction. Then we move on to our criteria step 2, which is where we apply the council priorities. We look at all these streets and we rank them according to the council priorities. Then we move to step 3, and it doesn't make sense for me to send heavy equipment out to one council district and then immediately move it all the way to the other side of the city. It's not cost effective. So we group these streets by geographical area. We take into account schools, bus routes, the density of population we're serving, and high customer service requests and continual maintenance. So that's our step 3. And that's how we get to the lists that we present to you. So before we move forward, I want to talk a little bit about minor roadway information. Historically, these are the amounts of lane miles, number of roadways, and millions of dollars we've invested in the last 3 bonds. And you can see that even though the dollar value has gone up with each bond cycle, the number of lane miles and the number of roadways has decreased. And our goal has always been to try to be at around 50 lane miles, but just so you know, that only represents 2.7% of the total streets with PCI less than 50. This is how TPW's funding splits out by project category. As you can see, by far, the largest category is major roadways, but the second largest is minor roadways. And this splits out the areas of focus in TPW's program for the proposed 26 bond by highest priority in each district by dollar value. So you look at your district and the most money is being spent on the first item and then the second most on the second item in this list. So now we're ready to move into our recommendations. This is just what you saw last time as far as the total lane miles and estimated cost per council district in the minor roadways program. A couple of things have happened. First of all, you need to be aware that the 2022 bond program, Neighborhood Streets Program, had a shortfall of $16 million. On May 20th, Council acted to approve a $10 million tax note, and that has allowed 3 of those contracts, number 15 in District 9, 17 in District 8, and 19 in District 9, to move forward, and they will start construction by this winter. However, we still have a shortfall. $3.54 million was included in the proposal that you've seen in the past for the remaining contract, number 18, which affects council districts 5, 8, and 11, but it still has a $2 million shortfall. In addition, on the major roadway side, we have a developer who is going to be responsible for their adjacent portions in Bonds Ranch Segment 1. As a result, we're able to remove $7 million from the proposed 2026 bond major roadway program that you saw last time. And we are proposing to use it to cover that $2.4 million shortfall on the 2022 bond neighborhood street program. That leaves us $4.6 million that we'd like to apply to the next highest ranked minor roadways. And just briefly, I want to show you about your other handouts here, these 2 lists. They list the first 3/4 of that page is the funded streets, the bottom 1/4 is unfunded streets, and one sheet is sorted by district and then rank, and the other sheet is sorted by rank only. So this slide shows you the unfunded list sorted by rank. And we are proposing to add the top 2 ranked streets from contract 14 into the proposed 26 bond program. That affects districts 9 and 11.
Do you have, by any chance, what the value of the rest of the unfunded streets on this list would be?
The total value? I mean, I think the value's listed right here, sir. There's a column.
The total value would be 125 million for all that was ranked and prepared, so.
Okay, that number is inclusive of the funded and unfunded.
Correct,
I was just kind of interested in what the total dollars of the unfunded list was.
We can get you that information, sir.
I really appreciate staff's work on this, and I appreciate the time that y'all spent with me yesterday, walking me through. I think you're going to see a bunch of IRs later because you gave me a lot to think on, so thank you for that. Or maybe don't thank me for that because you're the ones doing the IRs, but we will all be better for it. So thank you. I'd like to point out that of the streets, if you go back to the slide with the PCI below 50, District 9 is the second highest in the city at 35.5% of our streets being below that 50% mark, which is only slightly under the highest, which is District 11 at 36.2. But when you go and look at the 2026 recommended bond program minor roadways, District 9 has the lowest number of lane miles invested in. And so it seems to me that if we're ranking, there should be some sort of correlation with the number of lane miles in our minor roadways that we're repairing to those percentages. And the reason I asked for those percentages was to give us some sort of idea of what each one of us are working with in our districts. Some of us are very lucky. Charlie and Alan, I would love to be you today with those 3.7 and 2.4 numbers. But I think maybe with the addition of those 2 new projects, we'll see some of that level out. But to me, that doesn't seem right, that I'd be the second, District 9 is the second highest in the city, but the lowest number of lane miles are being invested in the bond.
I understand your concern, but I would refer to the heavy maintenance projects, lane miles, where Council District 9 does have the most projects.
Right.
And so also referring back to our scoring matrix, if you will, there are many other options for streets for heavy maintenance than just the bond. And one of the main drivers for bond projects is the need for curb and gutter.
Right.
So it's very possible that maybe you've got better curb and gutter in your district, so the heavy maintenance is more suitable for the majority of your roadways.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And then as we talk about the overall bond list, which is right here, giving us so much paper today, I noticed that we've increased the open space proposed funding, $10 million from last time's proposed bond. I'd like to see that, discussion about that going back to the 2022 level at $15 million, to take that $10 million and put back into TPW so that we can get more of those unfunded projects off of our list.
And I'm happy to have that conversation. I don't agree. I think we're growing so rapidly that this land will be gone before we can preserve it. I think we have a really unique opportunity in 2026 to partner with philanthropy, possibly, and even double the size of that fund. It's a healthy exercise. I do respect that. But I just want to put down on the record that if we're going to discuss it openly, that part of that money, it won't be available to us to purchase in 2030 based on a lot of our projections with our open space tool and the work with Trust for Public Land. So, and furthermore, we can't utilize other funds for open space, or have traditionally not in the past, to any kind of effective rate. So happy to have that discussion. On the streets conversation, Lauren, I think one thing that might be missing, especially helpful to council members as they have conversations in their districts, is this presentation is so helpful. It's very technical. And the other thing, especially for our neighborhoods that are inside the loop versus outside the loop, we've all kind of experienced what it's like to communicate the tale of two cities, you know, where you have newer construction, newer neighborhoods versus historic neighborhoods inside the loop, and the infrastructure needs of those neighborhoods are quite different. And I have to commend you as a leader of TPW. You've used a tremendous amount of technology and data to really inform the way we make decisions. And so to the extent necessary, maybe working with SUNA and communications, how do we communicate this more clearly so that if Councilmember Beck or Councilmember Nettles is trying to meet with their neighbors, those presentations probably need to look different than up in D10 where you have newer neighborhoods and build out. And sometimes I know it's a frustration because council members don't probably feel like they have the tools to do that, especially if it's in a spreadsheet form. So maybe as we get through this cycle, we can talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, just as a comment, in the past two bond programs I've worked with, a continual talking point is specifically on the minor roadways. If you don't see your street that you're concerned with in this program that we proposed, it is not panic time. There are many other options, and there might already be work programmed for the streets that you're interested in.
Councilmember Peoples?
I just wanted to thank Lauren and Patricia for giving this council person a remedial lesson. You all did an amazing job, and I want Councilwoman Beck to know that I spent a lot of time looking at these charts, and I was concerned about District 9 too. I was while I'm concerned about 5, and I expressed that at the last meeting, I looked at a lot of the work that was being done inner city, inside the loop, and District 9, I advocated for you as strongly as I did for 5. But I commend you all, because if we go back to the slide, this is what concerned me on the number of miles that we're able to fix. The number of lane miles continues to go down, and the cost continues to go up. And so if we don't come up with a process like this that's aimed at fixing some of these, the lane miles, I hate to look at the next bond election, because I believe that based on the way they're going, we'll be in the 20s for lane miles, and the cost will be skyrocketing. So I applaud you for this approach, because I think we've got to get our hands around the cost and try to do the most cost-effective way of repairing not only those things inside the loop, and watch this, Lauren, my street is concrete, okay? But we've got to get our hands around that so that the costs don't continue to go up, because we're going to reach a point where we're not going to be able to catch up at all.
And to piggyback on Councilmember Peoples' comment, do you have a top level, what are your best cost mitigation strategies you've employed over the last few budget cycles, whether some of it's bringing teams in-house rather than contracting? Can you point to any of those today, Lauren?
So every year we do a cost of service analysis where we essentially compare our in-house crews to a contracted version. Now, obviously, they're different mechanisms, so we do kind of look at those with the appropriate lenses, but also, you know, our push for more maintenance. It is more fiscally responsible to maintain what we have than to reconstruct. If we are always trying to reconstruct what has failed and not maintain what we have, we will never catch up.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hill.
One, this is very, very helpful for me. This list that y'all provided, the funded and unfunded list, is extremely helpful to me as well. When we look at budget and kind of put a pin in this for our budget conversations, could we get a list like this for the heavy maintenance roads? Because I think that having it ranked by district, how long they are, how much it is, that is incredibly helpful as we try to figure out where the priority is for us a budget cycle.
Yeah, we can accommodate that. And to answer Councilmember Blaylock's question while we're on the topic, the unfunded is $35 million. So we plan for a total of $125 million.
And then question on the $35 million unfunded list, and this could be at a future workshop, but curious what of that list you anticipate could be covered in future budget cycles out of the general fund outside of a 2030 bond election. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please, Councilmember Martinez.
Lauren, I know that there are many areas in District 11 that have cast iron, and so those streets are pulled, at least for Pago, and I don't know about the bond, but I'd like to see where all those are at, just so I can be aware when the community reaches out and just kind of have questions about why my road hasn't been maintained or repaved.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a point on the record, streets with cast iron are not excluded from bond consideration. And in fact, many are included in the bond program to have that economies of scale in construction.
Councilmember Beck, didn't you ask that question? I mean, it was 2 cycles ago, President, about cast iron and the work with water department. I don't think that I got clarity on that either.
I did, and it's part of the litany of IRs that I have that I'm
Okay.
going to ask for, because I got a little bit of clarification yesterday in our meeting, but I think we need to dig a little deeper on how we.
And I'd be fine even if we wanted to do that in another bond workshop, if you want to do that with water department, because I know that's quite complicated. That's fine with me. That's helpful. Anyone? Yes, Councilmember Crane.
Thanks, Lauren and team, for putting this together. I would just like to have a conversation. We don't have to do it right now, but later. Some of these roads are in District 3 that have been identified are transitioning. There's some homes there, but they're industrial, turning into industrial. So I'd just like to have that conversation of what we're going to do there, what that looks like, and maybe what responsibilities some of those businesses have as part of that too, since they're using those in a way that aren't really conducive to city streets.
Okay, we'd be happy to.
Yeah, Councilmember Flores.
One example of something similar that Councilmember Crane pointed out in my district, Arion Avenue. I know we've had some correspondence with TPW on that. What's going on is that you have 18-wheeler traffic cutting through neighborhood streets. Why? Our esteemed colleagues at TxDOT decided to build concrete medians on 28th Street, which forces this type of traffic through that street. And I get complaints every week about it. There is no enforcement solution to that. I've outreached to TxDOT myself. Seems to be falling on deaf ears. If there's anything that TPW can do about that to increase the attention on that, I really do need a median cut. That would solve the immediate problem, in my opinion.
I'd be happy to look into that.
Thank you. Because that's a lot of wear and tear on that street. And, it's already appearing on our unfunded list.
Jeanette asked a question earlier that made me think to your question. So each of you receive a call from a constituent that says, I'm unhappy about McCart or whatever the street is. I guess each office probably does this differently in terms of your access to knowing these are the streets under construction, this is how we're communicating to the public. That's sort of what I'm getting to, Lauren, is to make sure, and we could, I mean, honestly, district directors probably would love to sit in a room and say, this is how we like to communicate this to each office or to each constituent, because I know that's a huge volume of calls that you get out of question. It probably would be really nice if it was readily available, and you feel like you were constantly having to go back to TPW with that, especially as we head into the bond election. And if you have questions about this unfunded list, okay, what does that mean for my neighborhood?
And so we're actually right at the time where we'll be scheduling our biannual council district updates, where we discuss your active projects and your planned projects for the next fiscal year. And we'll leave each council member with a handout for reference, and then also introduce both our assistant directors responsible for these programs, as well as our customer service representatives who can help answer those questions.
And I also feel like it could live on your websites. I mean, really building out each district website to say this is a live tally of where we are, where it's funded, what the construction looks like, who the contractor is, all of those things.
So I do believe most heavy maintenance projects will be listed on the council members' webpage as well.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Great job, ladies. Thank you. What's next, JL?
That's it. That's all we
Okay,
just have
council,
out
so
there.
on this topic, though, what future bond discussions do we want to put on future agenda items for our next roundtable? Do you have any, it doesn't have to be transportation related, any other? Councilmember Beck wanted to talk about open space, that needs to be on the table. Anybody else want to talk about anything else?
I have one, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Larsdorf.
We kind of brought it up before, but since it's on this list, if we can talk through the public art again and how that process works, the funding for that, because, to Councilmember Beck's point, that $10 million that, I mean, honestly, every dollar we have that can be going to streets really does need to be going to streets. I don't care if it's 4, 6, 10, I don't care what district it is, but I think we need to just have that conversation of how that works and what we can do.
And importantly, the last presentation, they gave options for us to consider. I don't know if anybody thought those were the right options, if you had feedback on those. I mean, we need to recircle that around before we have the public discussion. I think that's important. Yeah. Councilmember Nettles?
Yeah, and just a concern on the public part, the public art. Was it discussed that we can only do public art with bond funding?
We were talking about the amount of dollars that go to public art from the bond funds. We weren't talking outside of bonds.
Right, but I'm saying if we got rid of the bond dollars for public art, were we able to use other dollars for public art?
You're saying if we did, could
Correct.
you use general fund dollars?
We could, yeah. It's not a, I think we actually provide funding out of the general fund for public art currently.
Okay.
So at the next, I was hoping our timeline for, we come back with the next meeting, we can go over these items. We'd like to see if we're at a position then to have finalize the actual bond program so that we could kick off some public meetings in late July to try to fit into a schedule where we could finish before the end of the year to bring a final list to the council in December that would be ready to go into the start of the next year for the actual bond election. So that's kind of the timeline that we're trying to hit. So we could come back on the 17th with the next bond presentation. Between now and then, we can resend, well, you have the full list that was provided today, but we can have the major topics be open space and the public art piece, if y'all are with that.
Well, I just want us to be very clear that while I welcome the discussion on open space and public art, you cannot, or it is my position that you cannot just arbitrarily take money from that and put it in the streets, because those are amenities that make this city so attractive. And so I'm a big proponent of public art and conservation, especially in my district where there's a lot of green space, and I want to make sure that we're understanding if we take from those pots and we put it in the other, we're starting to diminish the things that make our city so attractive to people and why they want to move here.
Councilmember Larsdorf?
So, and I totally understand that point, but one of the points I made a couple months ago about that was, yeah, while it's great, it looks beautiful, the issues whenever you have roads that are in such disrepair, not necessarily in 4, as Councilmember Beck pointed out, you have roads that are in such disrepair, I think it's disingenuous to taxpayers if it's like, all right, hey, you got this nice piece of art, but if that money could have gone to improve that pothole that car just, got destroyed by, and now they're, sitting on the side of the road waiting for roadside assistance, looking at a pretty piece of art. I just think it's the priorities, I think, are wrong, and you're sending the wrong message. It's like, hey, we believe in this. However, we have other priorities that we completely put to the bottom of the list for something that is a nice to have, not a need to have. I don't think anyone here on this council would argue that public art it's great and it's nice to have, but as long as we have needs, and we hear from TPW on the billions of dollars that it would actually take to take care of the needs right now, not even just preventative, but to actually fix them correctly, I think it's a slap in the face of those taxpayers who need every dollar they have. It'd be like telling them they need to adjust their home grocery budget to have going out to Andretti's, racing cars instead. I think it's just disingenuous. So that was my point there. I don't think anyone wants to completely get rid of it. I think maybe finding other ways to use public partnerships or private partnerships and helping to pay for some of those.
Jay, I had a question. If there is a project that was on the secondary recommended unfunded list or whatever you call it, I can't remember what the term was, when would be appropriate should I reach out to the department to kind of like swap a project out, or how would that work?
I think the idea was that we'd go out to the public process to get feedback from the public overall.
Mm-hmm.
You mean like swapping out a project in your district for a project in your district? Or?
Yes.
Based on what you think is a better priority?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we can discuss that between now and on the streets and those.
So reach out to that department in particular?
Yes.
I'm glad you brought
Or
that
the
up.
assistant city manager over that area.
And that's a good point, Councilmember Martinez. If you look, each of you may already have had time to do this, but on the street bond funded list, compared to the unfunded list.
Yes.
If there are swaps for good reason that you want to work with TPW, let's do that now before you go out into the public and confuse.
Right,
me.
'cause
I
you
think
know
that's
that
smart.
the neighborhoods, they're more interested in this
Yeah.
road versus that road. That makes total sense and within your district.
Okay.
The hard part is when you start talking about multiple districts.
Yeah, I want to make that suggestion before we go out to the public meetings. And so, Jess, that's you, so keep an ear out for my call.
Makes sense.
I do have something else to
Councilor
add.
Nettles.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess it was the unfunded list, not just the street, but just the unfunded list. And I believe in one of those slides, we had 10 million or 5 million in housing. And I know it didn't make the list. So I want us to have a discussion about that when we come back of.
Next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting where we can squeeze out that $10 million at.
Yes, Councilmember Hill.
I know you mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate, could we also have that list that Charlie's referring to about our options for public art so before we have our next bond meeting so we can actually have a robust conversation about it?
Agreed.
We'll resend a slide out to everyone.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, we're going to adjourn and we'll move into executive session. So, and I'll read this before we go back there. The City Council will now convene into executive session on the following matters. The City Council will conduct a closed meeting in order to seek the advice of its attorneys as authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, deliberate concerning real property matters as authorized by Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code, deliberate concerning economic development negotiations as authorized by Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code, and deliberate concerning security as authorized by 551.076 and Section 551.089 to the Texas Government Code. Thank you.